Okay. So what if? Sometimes when things are cut short, it's because you're the end of the story. What does it look like for all of us to be a part of what God is doing in our city? Tonight is the final week of Saturate Altoona in downtown Altoona as the churches continue to gather together, and there's so much momentum right now as the churches continue to lock arms. But I want to remind us that the point is not gathering in downtown Altoona and seeing how many people we can get together. The point is running after Jesus and being on mission with him. The fruit of Saturate Altoona is not what takes place right now as we gather for worship, but what takes place in people's hearts and lives as we begin to function as one church, working in step with one another, so that every man, woman, and child has an opportunity to hear and respond to the good news about Jesus. And whether you're a teacher, a doctor, a business person, a stay-at-home mom, retired, whatever it is, God has placed you in a position of influence that he's inviting you to be a part of the story. I love the testimony of the teacher because sometimes we get this idea that there are places that we're not allowed to preach and share the gospel, and that is true. There are places that if you go and try to preach, you're going to get shut down. But there's no place that a disciple of Jesus cannot live out the kingdom and live out the principles and display to the world what it looks like to live in right relationship with God and to be a part of what God is doing. And when we begin to see that all of life is redeemed, even though there might be contexts where you can't share the gospel, we do not live in a world that says you cannot have relationship with people outside your work. You realize that? There might be some context, but there's nothing that says that you can only have relationships with people in certain specific contexts. You can invite them into your life and you can walk with them as they discover who Jesus is and what it looks like to know and have a relationship with Jesus. This morning I want to read from Matthew 10. Matthew 10 is one of my favorite passages, actually Matthew 9 and 10. The end of chapter 9 of Matthew ends as Jesus is going from village to village and he's declaring the good news about the kingdom. He's healing the sick. He's declaring hope and wholeness. And we're told that Jesus is moved with compassion as he encounters the brokenness of our community. Altoona is not the first broken city. I can just imagine that if Jesus were to walk down the streets of Altoona, that he would be moved with compassion as he encounters broken and hurting people looking for hope. And chapter 9 ends by Jesus turning to his disciples and saying, "The harvest is great, but the workers are few." And he commands his disciples to pray to the Lord of the harvest to send out more harvesters. And then chapter 9 ends, and most people think that, that's the end of the story. But chapter 10 begins with Jesus saying, okay, Peter, John, you guys who come, and he sends them out. The very people that he challenged to pray for more workers, Jesus says, hey, good news, guys. The prayer's been answered. You guys are here, and he sends them out, and I want to look at the commands he gives them as he sends them out. Beginning in verse 5, he says, Jesus sent out the 12 with these instructions: don't go to the Gentiles or the Samaritans, but only to the people of Israel, God's lost sheep. And sometimes maybe you're like, wait a second, I thought Jesus came for everybody. Well, he did. He came for everybody. But this was a trial run. This was Jesus saying, one day I'm going to be gone, and you guys are going to need to know how to do this on your own. Right now, we're sending you out on a trial run. You know where you start? With the people you already know. Sometimes we use excuses of, well, I couldn't go and do this, and I couldn't go and do this, and God didn't give me with this. But I want to challenge us, instead of focus on what we can't do, what if we focus on what we can do? What if, instead of being discouraged by the places that are hard and difficult, we actually started looking at the low-hanging fruit and said, oh, you know what? God's given me an open door here to share the gospel, to point people to Jesus. What if I walk through that door? Now, on our wall, it says, each one reach one. And I know we've talked about the 290,000 as the churches are coming together, talking about what does it mean to make sure that every man, woman, and child in our region has opportunity to hear and respond to the good news about Jesus. But sometimes we get lost in the numbers and forget that the most significant thing that could happen in turning this city upside down is that each and every one of us in this room and each and every one of the followers of Jesus who are right now gathered in all the congregations across our city just realize this year, if I do nothing else but walk with one individual who a year from now is closer to Jesus than they are now, I've been successful. Do you know what successful disciple making looks like? When we talk about Jesus' command to go and make disciples, success is simply being faithful to Jesus and walking with people as they come to know who Jesus is. And if you have one individual in your life who you're having positive conversations with about Jesus and walking with them as they discover who Jesus is, like when that happens, there's a party in heaven. Like literally, they're throwing parties in heaven and they're celebrating the work that you're doing, and you're like, there's only one person. I'm pretty sure Jesus would have died for that one person. If they were the only person on the planet, Jesus would have still come and he would have still died because he knows their name and he knows their story. One of Satan's biggest tactics is he whispers in our ear, but you're not Billy Graham. You're not successful because you didn't do this and you didn't do that. And we get so focused on what God's not even calling us to do that we lose sight of what he is calling us to do. So what if we simply started by being obedient and going where we already are, where we already have influence, where we already have connection, and allow God to show up and work. In verse 7, he says, go and announce to them the kingdom of heaven is near. Go and announce to them the kingdom of heaven is near. I know we've talked about this a lot, but Jesus' primary focus, if you look at all of the times that Jesus talks, and you look at all of the messages that Jesus is communicating, his primary focus is about the arrival of the kingdom. The king was arriving. The early church very much understood that Jesus was the rightful king, and that when we are restored into right relationship with God, we're invited to live in his kingdom. And we get an opportunity to display to the world what it looks like to live in right relationship with God. When we go out into our community and we say, I'm living under the rule and reign of God. He is my boss, he is my Lord, he is my master, and my primary concern is living in right relationship with God, no matter the cost, no matter what that means. I'm going to put him first in my life, and I'm going to live in such a way that displays to the world around me what it looks like to live in right relationship with God. We're displaying for a broken world what it looks like to be invited into his kingdom and what it will look like one day to live in a world that has been restored and renewed. That's why in verse 8 he commands the disciples. He says, heal the sick, raise the dead, cure those with leprosy, cast out demons, give as freely as you have received. It says, heal the sick, raise the dead, cure those with leprosy, and cast out demons. Pretty bold statement. Now there are some who are faithful followers of Jesus who would claim that miracles are a thing of the past. The miracles are things that God did in the past. And that they're done and it's over and now we just follow Jesus and we wait till he comes back. And then there are others on the other extreme that that go all the way to the extreme that if a miracle doesn't happen, you don't have any faith. And I personally believe both are wrong. You can fall in the ditch on either way. God is not a rabbit's foot that you keep in your pocket for a good luck charm that you just call on so that nothing bad ever happens. That being said, as Christians, we claim, just think about this. We claim that we gathered here today because we have a relationship with the one who spoke and everything that is came into existence. The God who spoke and gave life to everything that is the God that stepped into the story as Jesus and is the God that is still alive and still active and still working and still moving and is still pursuing people. And when we look at the miracles that were taking place all through the New Testament and the miracles that have continued to happen throughout church history, the primary reason of miracles was to prove to a non-believing world that God exists. Do you realize that maybe you have an atheist coworker or an agnostic or someone that is in your neighborhood who is of another religion or another background or someone that is grown up outside of the church and has no frame of reference for God, no understanding of God? You can talk to them until you're blue in the face. And they're going to be like, you're just a little bit weird. But you have an encounter with someone in a moment of need where you feel prompted by the Holy Spirit to just say, can I pray for you? And God shows up in a powerful way. There is nothing more convincing of the power and presence of God when he shows up and does something powerful and miraculous. J.D. Greer points out, I think there's 28 miracles that happen in the book of Acts. All but 2 of those happen in the public square. They didn't happen with the Christians gathered in the homes. They were out on the streets where people were working, where people were living, where people were going about their business, and they were used to convince those outside the faith that God was real and personal and active. And I still believe with all of my heart that if we are truly a people that are on mission with God, that we are going to encounter times when God shows up in powerful ways, and you stand back and you're like, oh. I don't know if any of you have been watching America's Got Talent, but this week, the magician that was on America's Got Talent, she gets to the end of the magic show, and she was more excited than the crowd was when it happened. She's like, I thought it failed, but she was so blown away that it actually worked. And I think that sometimes we too Do we believe that God's going to show up? And sometimes God's wanting to increase our faith as much as he's wanting to increase the faith of the individuals that we are ministering to. And I cannot stress enough, and I want to continue to remind us that if we're going to be a church that continues to join God on a mission, we need to be a church that when we leave this building, we expect to see God. Now, I'm not saying that you go around and you just start telling everybody that, like, I know the doctors said you have cancer and you're going to die in 6 months, and I'm going to pray for you, and you just got to pretend that your cancer's... I'm not saying that. But I do think that we need to be more intentional whenever we have conversations with people where we're saying, God, what are you wanting to do? And sometimes I believe that God's going to prompt us and say, I want to show up in a powerful way. And I want to declare in this workplace, in this neighborhood, in this family, that I am real, and I'm powerful, and I'm working, and I'm moving, and displaying the hope of the kingdom. And may we be people that have the faith to believe that God is going to work. Then Jesus goes on to say this: don't take any money in your money belts, no gold, silver, or even copper coins. Don't carry a traveler's bag with change of clothes and sandals or even a walking stick. Don't hesitate to accept hospitality, because those who work deserve to be fed. And maybe you're wondering, why in the world is Jesus sending? It feels in this verse almost like Jesus is sending them out unprepared. Or is he? I really think what Jesus is doing here is saying, I want you to learn to rely on me. What the problem is with money is that we look at it and we're like, well, this is what I can buy. This is what I can do. This is how much I have. The fact of the matter is that if we're honest, most of us live within the realm. Yeah, we're Christians. Yeah, we follow Jesus. Yeah, we believe God can do miraculous things. Yeah, we believe God can show up in powerful ways. But the truth of the matter is that very few of us ever do anything that moves within the realm that if God doesn't show up, I'm going to fail. We limit what God can do in and through us because we say, God, this is what I have. This is what I can do. And God's like, what do you mean this is what you have and this is what you can do? I don't need that. What does it look like to actually move beyond our means and be a part of what God is going to do? What is God wanting to do in and through you that you're hindering because God is continually prompting you, and well, I can't do that, so that must not be God. God's like, if you could do that, I'd have you do something else. Because I want you to rely on me. I want you to experience what it looks like for God to show up. Then he says in verse 11, whenever you enter a city or a village, search for a worthy person and stay in his home and until you leave town. And when you enter the home, give it your blessing. And if it turns out to be a worthy home, let your blessing stand. If it is not, take back the blessing. I've talked about the person of peace principle multiple times over the years at Overflow, but one of the things that we see in Jesus' ministry and the training that he gave to the 12 that is still 100% applicable to us today is that he sent the disciples out and said, look for that person of peace. Look for that person that is ready to receive you. Again, this goes back to what I said earlier, that we often miss what God is trying to do because we become discouraged by what isn't happening. When you go out into the community and you encounter people that are not ready to receive the gospel, love them, pray for them, but don't be discouraged and stop because you encountered someone that's not ready. It's easy to, and I will be the first one to admit, for years I felt like a failure because every time I would share the gospel, and every time I'd have a gospel conversation with people, there's one, oh, that's nice. That's cool. I'm not ready to receive the gospel. I'm not ready to pray. And for years, I lived with this sense of failure because, I knew I was supposed to share my faith, and every time I shared my faith, no one was ready to cross the line of faith, and I just kind of felt like I was a failure. I wasn't doing it right. Something's wrong with me. And then I realized the only thing God is asking me to do is walk in faithfulness to Him. And then I discovered that sometimes when that one person did come to know Christ, they actually started the domino effect. And most of the people that came to know Christ because of my faithfulness were actually the result of the people that I shared the gospel with telling all their friends about Jesus. And yet, as Christians, we often live in discouragement because we have conversations. And all of us, we celebrate the gospel conversations, but all of us, if you are faithful to the work that God is calling you to, there are going to be times where you have gospel conversations and you walk away and nothing happened. That wasn't successful. That wasn't nothing. I don't even know. Maybe I didn't even hear the prompting of the Holy Spirit. Maybe that was what I ate last night for supper. But our purpose and goal is continually being faithful to God. And when we find that person of peace, stay with them, disciple them, walk with them, continue the conversation, help them to grow in their walk with God, and allow them and not be discouraged or hindered by those that we encounter that aren't ready. And you know what? Now that I've been doing this long enough, I've actually got the opportunity to look back and realize that some of those gospel conversations that I walked away from and was like, well, that was a failure. That didn't go anywhere. God was actually working behind the scenes and moving in people's lives in a way that I, as just a normal human being like you, was not able to understand in the moment that God was working. And will we simply be people that are allowing God to work? He ends this passage by saying, if any household or town refuses to welcome you or listen to your message, shake its dust from your feet as you leave. I tell you the truth, the wicked cities of Sodom and Gomorrah will be better off than such a town on Judgment Day. Look, I'm sending you out as sheep among wolves, so be shrewd as snakes and harmless as doves, but beware, for you will be handed over to the courts and will be flogged with whips in the synagogues. You will stand trial before governors and kings because you are my followers. But this will be your opportunity to tell the rulers and other unbelievers about me. When you are arrested, don't worry about how to respond or what to say. God will give you the right words at the right time. For it is not you who will be speaking. It will be the Spirit of your Father speaking through you. And I can just imagine Peter being like, what in the world are we getting into? Somewhere along the way, we got this idea that if we followed Jesus, it was going to be easy. But he doesn't promise that it will be easy, but he does promise that he will be with us. God is inviting us into a story that's been going on since the beginning of time, and we live in a city where each and every individual is known by our Heavenly Father. He knows their name. He knows their story. He cares deeply for them. He's running after them. He's pursuing them. And even when they're not ready to receive him, he's still loving them and treating them with dignity and respect, and he's inviting us to do the same. Let's not forget that we've gathered here on Sunday in 2023 because we serve a God who is willing to allow himself to be crucified because he loved us. He was willing to allow himself to be crucified because he loved those of our neighborhood and of our community, and he's running after them, and he desires relationship with them, and even for those who weren't ready, he still loved. Right down to the very end. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm thinking if I'm hanging on the cross, I'm like, where are the lightning bolts? God, strike them. What does Jesus say? Forgive them. Forgive them, for they know not what they do. May we be a people that come to know God so intimately and so deeply that we begin to see the people as Christ sees them. We begin to remember that hurting people often hurt people. There are people out there that are not making wise decisions. They're not doing what they should be, but they're people that Christ loves and desires, and may we be a people that don't lose sight of the fact that they are individuals created in the image of God that he's pursuing and desires. As we continue to lock arms with the city, I want to remind you that each and every one of us have been invited into this story. The church is not a spectator sport. This is, we do not exist so I can stand up on the stage on Sunday and do ministry for you. We've gathered here to celebrate as the church the work that God is doing in and through our life so that we can go out and be a part of what God is doing. Ministry is happening every day of the week. It's happening in every profession. There's no one here that says, you know what, well, I'm retired now. I'm done. I'm just going to play golf the rest of my life. It's not the way it works. We're all invited, and we might have different seasons. We might have different chapters. There might be seasons where you're walking with 20 people, and there might be seasons where you're walking with one person. There might be seasons where you feel like you do one thing every day that is making a difference, and there might be seasons where you just feel like everything you touch, you're seeing God and work. And there might be seasons where you feel like you're just walking and you're not sure where God is moving and working. You're just simply trying to be obedient. But may we be a people that are continually obedient to the work of God. And may we be a people that see God show up in the city in miraculous ways. I'm going to invite you to stand as we close in worship.
In the present, you are making new wine. In the soul I now surrender, you are breaking new ground. So I yield to you and to your careful. When I try the soil I now surrender. You are breaking new ground. You are breaking new ground. Make me a vessel. Make me an offering. Make me whatever you want me to be. I came here with nothing, but all you have given me. Jesus, bring new wine out of me. Jesus, bring new wine out of me. Jesus, bring new wine out of me. Where there is new wine, there is new power, there is new freedom, and the kingdom is here. Light my old flames to carry your new fire today. 'Cause where there is new wine, there is new power, there is new freedom, and the kingdom is here. Lay down my old flames to carry your new fire today. Make me a vessel. Make me an offering. Make me whatever you want me to be. God, I came here with nothing, but all you have given me. Jesus, bring new wine out of me. Jesus, bring new wine out of me. Jesus, bring new wine out of me. Amen. Have a wonderful